Democrats ratcheted up their investigations into President Trump in a major way Wednesday. The House Judiciary Committee authorized a subpoena for the entire 400-page Mueller report. The House Oversight Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings said he'd subpoena an accounting firm tied to the president for 10 years of financial records. His. And the Ways and Means Committee sent a letter to the IRS requesting 6 years of Trump's personal and business taxes and asked of his personal returns whether such return is or was ever under any type of examination or audit. That's an open question. Committee Chairman Richard Neal, Ways and Means, was asked what comes next if the administration fails to comply.
We intend to do follow-up within the 10-day period that was prescribed in the letter and the overture that we made. And then I think there are a series of other options going forward that we will explore, but we've already begun to think about them.
Are you considering subpoenas?
Well, that's something that we would have to consider down the road, but I don't want to kind of at this stage answer really what-if questions.
Late today, President Trump was asked about the role of the IRS in the Ways and Means request.
Tell the commissioner of the IRS not to disclose to the House Ways and Means Committee your tax return.
They'll speak to my lawyers. They'll speak to the Attorney General.
Will you direct the IRS to do that?
They'll speak to my lawyers, and they'll speak to the Attorney General.
For more, I'm joined by Democratic Congressman Jimmy Gomez of California, who serves on both the House Ways and Means Committee and the Oversight Committee, and Austin Evers, the Executive Director of the nonprofit American Oversight. Congressman, you sit on Ways and Means. Where does it stand right now? Because the law is so clear. The 1924 law says that your committee, Ways and Means, has the right, and the president, actually the IRS, has the responsibility. You shall provide
Correct.
the tax returns. What's the complication here?
There's no complication. If they actually follow the law, they would turn over the tax returns. It's very, very clear. And in the history of Congress, not one request has been denied. So if there is a denial to the Ways and Means Committee chairman, then that means that the White House probably got involved. Either Steve Mnuchin, the White House administration, somebody told them not to do it.
And what do you make of that? Because the law doesn't say the president shall provide the IRS returns, the tax rate. It says the IRS shall do it.
Correct. It's very clear. But one of the things we learned about this administration, especially Steve Mnuchin, Wilbur Ross, anybody associated with them, I question them all.
Are they all toadies?
They are. They all delay, dodge, and lie for this president to protect them.
Well, you got the evidence there. The battle over Trump's taxes will most certainly wind up in court. The Washington Post reports that according to two administration officials, quote, privately Trump has told White House advisors that he does not plan to hand over his tax returns to Congress and that he would fight the issue to the Supreme Court, hoping to stall it until after the 2020 election. I don't think Trump wants to see his tax returns. And I mean in the worst way. For him to hide this like this for all these years, there's something really nasty in there, I think.
It certainly seems that way, although the president does seem to have a penchant for acting guilty all the time. But when it comes to this statute, it's not the president who's turning them over. It is the IRS, as you pointed out. He doesn't really have the control. And at the end of the day, it's going to be the people at the IRS, the career civil servants, and the people who have to answer to history, but also this Congress, who are going to have to decide whether they want to go down standing in the way of Congress's oversight role for this president or stand up for the Constitution.
Well, here's a legal question. I don't know if anybody can answer this, but it seems to me it's not a question of he said, she said, or he said, or anything. This is a question about the law. It's not that Congress wants the documents. They have a statutory right to them.
It's not just that. It's that this statute is actually used all the time. People think that there's not much precedent. It's that it's so clearly written that it's never been challenged. Just recently, with the Lois Lerner investigation, committees on both sides of the Hill obtained reams of 6103 protected taxpayer information, and they published it. Yeah. This is used all the time. What the president wants is a standard that no other American gets.
Let me go to you, Congressman, about the court. We have a 5-4 Republican Supreme Court. Now, they're supposed to be nonpartisan, but yeah. All these fights, whether it's getting the Mueller report unredacted, to getting the information about who they're giving clearances to, like Ivanka and Jared and all that stuff going on in the White House, everything in tax returns all comes down to, if it goes to the courts this year, by the end of the year, do you trust the Supreme Court to give us a nonpartisan constitutional response?
I hope they do, but one of our job as a co-equal branch of government is to ask the questions and to follow the answers to wherever they may lead. And that's what we're doing. We're being responsible stewards of this branch of government to check the White House. And I think that if we ask the right questions, we'll get the right answers.
The president, why did I make that mistake? The president, the people are very different. He says nobody cares. What's your response to your people at home?
Oh, everybody cares. A poll after poll shows that people care about what this White House does. They've cared since he started running for president, when he didn't release his tax returns, when he lied that he was under audit, which I believe he actually lied that he was under audit. So we're going to push him, and the American people want him to be held accountable. If not, we wouldn't have taken back the House.
Austin?
I think one of the most
People that watch
important
this show care. I can tell you, I walk around with people. They ask me about it. People do want these tax returns.
I think people think he's got something to hide. And I think one of the most important things is not just that Congress asks the questions, but that the courts ask the questions. This administration loses all the time because when courts get involved, they make you articulate your arguments. And this administration takes absurd positions and they lose. And even this Supreme Court, I think, will look to history.
Do you think Mueller's got him? Do you think he's got him?
You think Mueller's got him?
Yeah.
The
He's
tax
had 2
returns?
years. Do you think he got the tax returns?
I think the Mueller team knows a lot about the Trump organization's finances and, talk about another thing Congress needs to see and, frankly, has a right to get.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.